Ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, I stand before you today deeply concerned by the recent developments in Kenya. The protests that have erupted across the nation are not merely an expression of frustration, but a clear call for justice and accountability. In light of these events, Ibrahim Traoré has made a firm and urgent demand that the African Union takes immediate and decisive action to investigate William Ruto, the Kenyan president, in connection with the ongoing unrest. The role of the African Union is to uphold peace, stability, and good governance across our continent. When protests reach a level that threatens the fabric of society, it is imperative that we understand the root causes fully and ensure that no individual, no matter how powerful, is above scrutiny. It is the duty of the AU to act as a guardian of democracy and human rights, ensuring that leaders are held accountable for actions that may incite violence or undermine public trust. The calls for investigation are not an attack on Kenya's sovereignty, but rather a step towards transparency and justice. It is vital for the AU to carry out a thorough and impartial inquiry to determine if any abuses of power, human rights violations, or mismanagement have contributed to the current crisis. Only through truth and accountability can we pave the way for lasting peace and prevent future conflicts. We must remember that the voices of the people are the foundation of any democracy. Their right to peaceful protest is sacred, and any attempt to suppress it through violence or intimidation must be condemned. The African Union's intervention will not only protect the Kenyan people, but will also send a strong message to leaders across Africa that justice and human dignity must always come before political ambition. Let us stand united in demanding that the AU respond swiftly and justly. Let us hope that through investigation and dialogue, Kenya can find its way back to stability and harmony. The future of our continent depends on leaders who are accountable and institutions that uphold the rights and aspirations of all African people. Thank you. The recent protests in Kenya have brought to light profound concerns about justice, governance, and accountability that cannot be ignored. Across the country, citizens have taken to the streets not out of mere discontent, but because they feel their voices are not being heard, their rights are being overlooked, and their leaders are failing to uphold the standards of transparency and fairness expected in a democratic society. These protests reflect a growing frustration with systemic issues that have long plagued the nation, and they demand urgent attention from both national authorities and the wider African community. At the heart of these demonstrations lies a powerful call for justice. People want to see a government that acts in their best interests and holds itself accountable when it falls short. Justice is not only about punishing wrongdoing, but also about creating conditions where everyone is treated fairly, where laws apply equally, and where corruption and abuse of power are rooted out. When citizens witness injustice or perceive their leaders as benefiting from systems that oppress or marginalize others, their trust in institutions erodes. This erosion of trust fuels anger and leads to protests as a way of demanding change. The ongoing unrest in Kenya signals that this trust has been deeply damaged and that urgent steps must be taken to rebuild it. Governance, or the way in which a country is managed and led, is another critical issue at play. Effective governance requires transparency, accountability, and a genuine commitment to serving the public good. When governance fails, it often leads to inequality, exclusion, and social unrest. In Kenya's case, many people feel that governance has been compromised by political maneuvering, favoritism, and a lack of responsiveness to the needs of ordinary citizens. These feelings are compounded by economic hardships, unemployment, and rising living costs, which disproportionately affect the most vulnerable segments of society. When leaders fail to address these issues with honesty and competence, the social contract between the government and its people is broken. Accountability is essential in any democracy because it ensures that those in power are answerable for their actions. Without accountability, corruption flourishes, public resources are mismanaged, and human rights abuses may go unchecked. Citizens expect their leaders to be transparent about their decisions, to uphold the rule of law, and to accept consequences if they fail in their duties. The recent protests indicate that many Kenyans believe their government has not lived up to these expectations. There are widespread allegations that political figures may have played a role in escalating tensions rather than calming them, and concerns that state forces have responded to protests with excessive force. Such situations highlight the urgent need for mechanisms that hold leaders accountable and protect the rights of citizens. The scale and intensity of the protests are a clear sign that these issues are not isolated incidents, but part of deeper structural problems within the political and social fabric of the country. It is important to recognize that protests are a form of expression that often emerge when formal channels for dialogue and redress are perceived to be ineffective or inaccessible. When people feel marginalized or ignored, they resort to collective action to make their demands heard. This is a critical moment for the government to listen and engage constructively with its citizens rather than dismiss or suppress their concerns. Furthermore, the unrest in Kenya has implications beyond its borders. Stability in any African country affects the entire continent's progress towards peace, development, and integration. Instability can lead to economic disruptions, refugee flows, and increased insecurity that transcend national boundaries. Therefore, the concerns about justice, governance, and accountability raised by these protests are not just Kenya's problem, they are a matter of regional importance that calls for solidarity and support from African institutions and partners. Addressing these concerns requires a multifaceted approach. First, there must be an impartial and thorough investigation into the causes and triggers of the protests, including any allegations of misuse of power or violations of human rights. Such an investigation should be transparent and involve independent observers to ensure credibility. Second, the government needs to recommit itself to upholding democratic principles by fostering an environment where free expression, peaceful assembly, and political participation are protected. This includes ensuring that security forces act with restraint and respect for human rights. Third, structural reforms are necessary to tackle corruption, improve public service delivery, and create economic opportunities that can alleviate the conditions fueling discontent. Good governance is about more than managing crises. It is about building resilient institutions that serve the people effectively over the long term. This requires political will, inclusive policies, and accountability mechanisms that operate consistently and fairly. Ultimately, the recent protests in Kenya are a powerful reminder that democracy is an ongoing process that demands vigilance and participation from both leaders and citizens. Justice, governance, and accountability are not abstract ideals but practical necessities that affect everyday lives. When these foundations are weak, societies become vulnerable to unrest and division. When they are strong, they provide the basis for peace, development, and the fulfillment of human potential. It is now imperative for all stakeholders, government officials, civil society, regional organizations, and international partners to work together to address these challenges. By doing so, Kenya can restore faith in its institutions, heal divisions within its society, and set an example for the rest of the continent. The voices raised in protest are a call for a better future, one where justice prevails, governance is effective, and accountability is the rule, not the exception. Ignoring these calls is not an option. Responding to them with sincerity and urgency is the path to lasting peace and progress. A recent call has been made urging the African Union to launch an investigation into the role of Kenya's President William Ruto in the ongoing unrest that has gripped the nation. This demand underscores the urgent need for transparency and responsibility from leadership during times of crisis. The situation in Kenya has become a matter of serious concern not only for its citizens but also for the wider African community, given the potential repercussions for regional stability and the principles of good governance that underpin democratic societies. The call for investigation is rooted in the belief that leadership must be held accountable when political actions or decisions contribute to social upheaval. When protests and unrest reach a scale that threatens national peace, it is vital to assess whether those in positions of power have acted in ways that exacerbate tensions or undermine the rights of the people they serve. Transparency in this process is essential. Without it, suspicion, distrust, and division deepen, making reconciliation and healing more difficult. An investigation by a respected continental body like the African Union can provide an impartial platform to uncover facts, establish accountability, and help restore public confidence. In any democratic system, leaders carry the responsibility of fostering peace, stability, and respect for human rights. When citizens feel that their grievances are ignored, or that their leaders may be contributing to instability, It leads to a breakdown in trust that can have far-reaching consequences. The unrest in Kenya has highlighted such a breakdown. Reports from the ground suggest that actions taken or policies implemented at the highest levels may have played a role in sparking or intensifying the protests. There are allegations and concerns about misuse of power, suppression of dissent, and excessive use of force against peaceful demonstrators. These serious accusations need to be thoroughly examined to ensure that justice is served and that lessons are learned to prevent similar occurrences in the future. The African Union's involvement is significant because it symbolizes a collective commitment by African nations to uphold democratic principles, human rights, and the rule of law. By calling on the AU to investigate, there is an appeal to a higher authority that transcends national interests and is tasked with safeguarding peace and stability across the continent. This step acknowledges that internal mechanisms alone may not be sufficient or impartial enough to address such a complex and sensitive situation. It also reflects a desire for solidarity among African countries in supporting one another to overcome political crises without descending into violence or authoritarianism. Transparency is the cornerstone of good governance and public trust. When investigations are conducted openly and the findings shared honestly with the public, it allows citizens to understand what happened and why. It also reassures them that their concerns are taken seriously and that those responsible for wrongdoing will be held accountable regardless of their status or position. This openness helps to rebuild trust between the government and its people, which is essential for social cohesion and national progress. Without transparency, rumors, misinformation, and conspiracy theories can take root, further destabilizing the situation. Responsibility goes hand in hand with transparency. Leaders must be prepared to accept responsibility for their actions and decisions, especially when these have significant impacts on the lives of their citizens. Accountability is not about punishment alone, but about ensuring that power is exercised in a manner that respects democratic values and human dignity. It is about setting a precedent that no one is above the law, and that the rights and welfare of the people are paramount. In the context of Kenya's unrest, this means examining the role of all actors involved, including the highest office, to determine whether leadership has fulfilled its duties or contributed to the crisis. An investigation by the African Union can also serve as a catalyst for broader reforms. It can highlight systemic weaknesses within governance structures and recommend changes to prevent future conflicts. This could include improving mechanisms for dialogue and dispute resolution, strengthening the independence of judicial institutions, and enhancing the protection of fundamental rights such as freedom of expression and assembly. By addressing root causes rather than just symptoms, the continent can work towards more resilient democracies capable of managing political disagreements peacefully. Moreover, the call for investigation reflects a recognition that political crises are not isolated events. They have ripple effects that can destabilize entire regions. Instability in one country can lead to economic disruptions, displacement of populations, and security challenges that cross borders. Therefore, it is in the interest of all African states to support efforts that promote accountability and good governance. By responding to this call, the African Union can demonstrate its effectiveness as a regional institution committed to peace and democracy, strengthening its legitimacy and the trust placed in it by member states and citizens alike. In conclusion, the demand for the African Union to investigate Kenya's President William Ruto's role in the recent unrest is a powerful call for transparency and responsibility in leadership. It emphasizes the need for impartial scrutiny of actions that may have contributed to national instability. Such an investigation is essential not only to address immediate grievances, but also to reinforce the democratic principles that sustain peace and development across Africa. Through openness and accountability, trust can be restored, and a path forward can be forged towards a more just and stable future for Kenya and the continent as a whole. The hope is that this process will lead to meaningful dialogue, reform, and reconciliation, ensuring that the voices of the people are respected and that their rights are protected. The African Union holds a critical and indispensable role in safeguarding peace, stability, and human rights throughout the African continent. Its mandate extends beyond merely being a political organization. It is the guardian of the values that bind African nations together, values that promote unity, justice, democracy, and respect for human dignity. In times of crisis, such as the unrest currently affecting Kenya, the AU's involvement is not only necessary but essential. Its intervention can make the difference between escalating conflict and lasting peace, between chaos and orderly governance. Africa has experienced numerous challenges over the decades: conflicts, coups, human rights violations, and political instability that have threatened its progress and development. The African Union was established with a clear mission to prevent such crises, to resolve them when they occur, and to ensure that the rights of all citizens are respected. It acts as a continental watchdog, a mediator, and sometimes a peacekeeper, tasked with upholding the ideals enshrined in the African Charter on Human and People's Rights and other key documents that emphasize democracy and the rule of law. The AU's role in these matters cannot be understated. It provides a platform where countries can seek assistance, dialogue, and, when necessary, accountability. In situations of unrest, such as protests or civil strife, the African Union's intervention can serve multiple purposes. Firstly, it acts as an impartial arbiter that can investigate and assess the root causes of conflict without national bias. This impartiality is crucial in ensuring that all parties feel heard and that any findings or recommendations are trusted. When governments and citizens alike accept the AU as a neutral body, it becomes easier to de-escalate tensions and foster meaningful dialogue. This legitimacy helps to bridge divides that might otherwise widen under domestic political pressures or ethnic and social cleavages. Secondly, the AU's involvement signals a collective commitment from African nations to uphold standards of governance and human rights. It demonstrates that no country is isolated or immune from scrutiny, and that the continent stands united in its pursuit of peace and justice. This sense of unity can exert pressure on leaders to adhere to democratic norms and respect the rights of their people. The African Union's principles affirm that sovereignty is not a shield for wrongdoing, rather it comes with responsibilities towards citizens and the broader African community. The African Union also plays a preventive role by intervening early when warning signs of conflict emerge. This preventive diplomacy involves engaging governments, opposition groups, and civil society in dialogue before tensions spiral out of control. Such proactive measures can prevent violence, save lives, and protect social cohesion. In the context of Kenya's current crisis, early AU involvement could help ensure that grievances are addressed constructively and that mechanisms for peaceful resolution are strengthened. When unrest does occur, the AU has a responsibility to investigate and report on violations of human rights or abuses of power. These investigations are critical for ensuring accountability. They provide an official record of events, identify those responsible, and recommend measures to remedy injustices. This process is not only about justice for victims, but also about sending a clear message that impunity will not be tolerated. Upholding accountability helps to restore trust in public institutions and rebuild the social contract between governments and their people. Moreover, the AU's role in maintaining peace and stability often extends to supporting post-conflict recovery and reconciliation efforts. This comprehensive approach recognizes that sustainable peace requires more than just ending violence. It requires healing divisions, rebuilding institutions, and creating inclusive political and economic systems. The African Union has facilitated peace agreements, monitored elections, and supported transitional justice processes in various member states. Its expertise and resources can be mobilized to help Kenya navigate the aftermath of unrest and work toward a more stable future. In addition to its political and peacekeeping functions, the African Union also champions the protection and promotion of human rights across the continent. Human rights are the foundation of democracy and peace, and violations often fuel discontent and conflict. The AU's mechanisms, such as the African Commission on Human and People's Rights and the African Court on Human and People's Rights, provide avenues for redress when rights are infringed. By intervening in crises where human rights abuses are alleged, the AU reinforces its commitment to these principles and helps to protect vulnerable populations. The African Union's intervention in crises, like the one in Kenya, also underscores the importance of regional solidarity and mutual support among African nations. Challenges faced by one country inevitably impact its neighbors, whether through refugee flows, economic disruption, or security threats. By stepping in to help mediate and resolve disputes, the AU fosters stability not only within individual countries but across entire regions. This collective security approach strengthens the continent's resilience and ability to pursue development goals. In summary, the African Union's vital role in maintaining peace, stability, and human rights across Africa makes its intervention in crises both necessary and impactful. Its ability to act as a neutral mediator, to uphold governance standards, to prevent conflict through early engagement, to ensure accountability, and to support post-conflict recovery is unmatched on the continent. The AU embodies the shared commitment of African nations to create a peaceful, just, and prosperous future for all their citizens. In times of crisis, such as the current unrest in Kenya, this role becomes even more crucial. Through decisive and principled intervention, the African Union can help guide countries back to peace and stability, ensuring that human rights are respected and that the aspirations of the people are realized. The continent's collective future depends on such leadership and solidarity now more than ever. An impartial investigation conducted by the African Union holds immense importance in uncovering the truth behind any abuses of power or human rights violations that may have contributed to the protests shaking Kenya. Such an investigation is crucial because it goes beyond surface-level observations and delves deeply into the root causes of unrest. It provides a transparent and credible means to assess allegations, dispel misinformation, and ultimately hold accountable those responsible for any wrongdoing. The value of impartiality in this process cannot be overstated, as it ensures that the findings are fair, objective, and respected by all parties involved. When protests erupt, especially on a large scale, there are often conflicting narratives about what triggered the unrest and who bears responsibility. Governments may claim the demonstrations are orchestrated by disruptive elements or foreign interference, while protesters may allege heavy-handed crackdowns, corruption, or systemic injustice. Without a neutral body to investigate, these narratives can harden into entrenched positions, making dialogue and resolution difficult. An investigation led by the African Union, a continental institution perceived as neutral and invested in peace and justice, can bridge this divide by providing an evidence-based account of events. Abuses of power by government officials or security forces frequently lie at the heart of protest movements. These abuses might include unlawful arrests, excessive use of force, intimidation, censorship, or failure to protect citizens' rights. When such actions occur unchecked, they erode public trust in state institutions and fuel grievances. An impartial investigation can uncover these abuses by gathering testimony from witnesses, victims, security personnel, and experts, as well as by reviewing documentation and footage related to the protests. This comprehensive approach helps to piece together an accurate picture of what happened and who was responsible. Human rights violations during periods of unrest are often pervasive and multifaceted. They can range from violations of freedom of expression and assembly to more severe abuses such as torture, extrajudicial killings, and arbitrary detentions. Identifying these violations is a critical step in ensuring justice and preventing future occurrences. The African Union's investigation can serve as a foundation for legal and political actions aimed at remedying harm, compensating victims, and reforming security protocols. It sends a message that human rights are non-negotiable and that violations will not be tolerated under any circumstances. The credibility of such an investigation hinges on its impartiality and independence. If the investigation is perceived as biased or influenced by political interests, its findings will be rejected by one or more parties, perpetuating division and conflict. The African Union, as a continental organization with a mandate to promote peace and democracy, is uniquely positioned to provide this impartial oversight. It can deploy experts and observers who have no vested interest in Kenya's internal politics, ensuring that the inquiry remains focused on uncovering the truth rather than serving any agenda. Furthermore, an impartial investigation by the AU can contribute to reconciliation and healing within Kenyan society. When grievances are aired openly and addressed transparently, it can help restore trust between citizens and the state. Victims and communities affected by violence or repression gain recognition and validation through the acknowledgement of their suffering. This recognition is a vital step toward national unity and social cohesion, enabling the country to move forward from the unrest with a shared understanding of the past. The investigation's findings can also have significant implications for governance and reforms. By identifying patterns of abuse or institutional weaknesses, the AU can recommend concrete changes to prevent future conflicts. These recommendations might include reforms in law enforcement practices, judicial oversight, protection of civil liberties, and mechanisms for citizen engagement. Implementing such reforms is essential to strengthening democratic institutions and ensuring that the government remains accountable to its people. In addition to national implications, the AU's investigation can reinforce the continent-wide commitment to upholding human rights and the rule of law. It signals that the African Union will not shy away from confronting difficult issues within member states, and that violations of rights during times of crisis will be scrutinized. This stance is crucial in building a culture of accountability and respect for democracy across Africa, helping to prevent impunity and encouraging good governance. An impartial investigation can also provide a model for other countries facing similar challenges. It demonstrates the importance of regional cooperation in addressing political crises and the value of credible, transparent processes in resolving disputes. By showing that even powerful figures can be held accountable and that justice can be pursued through peaceful means, the AU sets a precedent that strengthens democratic norms throughout the continent. Moreover, the outcomes of such an investigation can inform international responses, including those from the United Nations, human rights organizations, and donor countries. Clear, evidence-based reports help the international community tailor their support, whether through mediation efforts, humanitarian assistance, or development programs aimed at addressing underlying causes of instability. This coordinated approach increases the likelihood of sustainable peace and development. In conclusion, an impartial investigation by the African Union into abuses of power and human rights violations contributing to Kenya's protests is essential for uncovering the truth, ensuring justice, and fostering national healing. Its neutrality, thoroughness, and credibility make it a vital instrument for resolving the current crisis and preventing future unrest. Beyond immediate effects, such an investigation reinforces democratic values, promotes accountability, and strengthens regional cooperation. It is a necessary step toward building a peaceful and just society where the rights and dignity of every citizen are respected and protected. The right of people to peacefully protest is a fundamental pillar of any democratic society, and it must be respected and protected at all times. Peaceful protests are a vital means through which citizens express their grievances, demand justice, and participate actively in the political process. They provide a necessary outlet for voices that might otherwise be marginalized or unheard, allowing societies to evolve and governments to respond to the needs and concerns of their people. When peaceful protest is suppressed through violence or intimidation, it not only violates human rights but also undermines the very foundations of democracy and social cohesion. Peaceful protest is enshrined in numerous international human rights instruments, including the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and the African Charter on Human and People's Rights. These legal frameworks recognize that freedom of assembly and expression are essential for the functioning of democratic governance. They guarantee individuals the ability to come together, to voice dissent, and to seek redress without fear of retaliation. When governments or security forces fail to uphold these rights, they are not only breaking the law but also betraying the trust placed in them by their citizens. The importance of respecting peaceful protest becomes even more pronounced in times of political or social unrest. Protests often arise because people feel ignored, oppressed, or marginalized. They are expressions of dissatisfaction with policies, leadership, or social conditions. By allowing these protests to occur without interference, governments demonstrate their willingness to listen and engage constructively with their people. This engagement can lead to dialogue, reforms, and ultimately peaceful resolution of conflicts. Suppressing protests violently, on the other hand, exacerbates tensions and can provoke cycles of retaliation and unrest. Violence and intimidation as tools to suppress peaceful protest are deeply problematic. When authorities respond with force, whether through the use of tear gas, rubber bullets, arbitrary arrests, or worse, they risk causing harm not only to protesters but also to the broader society. Such actions often result in injuries, loss of life, and psychological trauma. They can also lead to widespread fear and a chilling effect on public participation, as citizens become reluctant to exercise their rights for fear of reprisal. This atmosphere of fear is toxic to democracy and stifles the healthy debate necessary for societal progress. Intimidation tactics, which may include threats, harassment, surveillance, and arrest of protest leaders or activists, also serve to undermine peaceful dissent. These tactics create an environment where people feel unsafe to express their opinions or to organize collectively. Intimidation is particularly harmful because it targets the very individuals and groups that are often at the forefront of advocating for positive change and accountability. When these voices are silenced, the space for civic engagement shrinks, and the government risks becoming unresponsive to the needs of its citizens. It is crucial to recognize that respecting the right to peaceful protest does not mean allowing disorder or violence to flourish. There is a clear distinction between peaceful demonstrations and violent acts that may occur within or alongside protests. Governments have a legitimate responsibility to maintain public order and protect the safety of all citizens. However, this responsibility must be balanced with the obligation to respect human rights and ensure that responses to protests are proportionate and lawful. The use of excessive force or collective punishment against protesters is unjustifiable and counterproductive. The condemnation of violence and intimidation against peaceful protesters must come from all quarters: governments, regional organizations, international bodies, and civil society alike. Such condemnation serves as a deterrent against future abuses and reinforces the universal principle that no one should be persecuted for exercising their democratic rights. Regional bodies like the African Union have a particularly important role in this regard, as they can monitor, report, and intervene when states violate their obligations to protect peaceful protests. Supporting the right to peaceful protest is also essential for social justice and inclusive governance. When protesters are heard and their demands taken seriously, it opens the door to addressing underlying social, economic, and political inequalities. This process contributes to building more resilient societies where diverse perspectives are respected and where governance reflects the will and welfare of the people. Ignoring or suppressing peaceful protest only deepens grievances and may eventually lead to more violent forms of resistance. In addition, the protection of peaceful protest strengthens the legitimacy of governments. Leaders who allow their citizens to express themselves freely demonstrate confidence in their governance and commitment to democratic principles. They create an environment where accountability is fostered, and public policies are shaped by genuine participation rather than coercion. This legitimacy is critical for maintaining long-term stability and preventing conflicts that arise from exclusion and repression. History has shown repeatedly that peaceful protest has been a powerful force for positive change around the world. From civil rights movements to anti-colonial struggles and demands for democratic reforms, the ability of people to gather peacefully and make their voices heard has transformed societies. Respecting this right is therefore not just a matter of legal obligation, but also a recognition of the vital role that citizens play in shaping their own futures. In conclusion, the people's right to peaceful protest is a cornerstone of democracy and human dignity. It must be respected unequivocally, and any attempts to suppress it through violence or intimidation must be firmly condemned. Governments have a duty to protect this right while maintaining public order through lawful and proportionate means. Regional and international bodies must stand ready to uphold these principles and support citizens in exercising their democratic freedoms. By safeguarding peaceful protest, societies affirm their commitment to justice, accountability, and inclusive governance, paving the way for lasting peace and progress. The African Union's intervention in the current crisis unfolding in Kenya is not just necessary but critical for the restoration of peace and long-term stability. Its involvement sends a strong and clear message about the importance of accountability among leaders and the commitment to uphold democratic principles. When a country experiences widespread unrest, the role of regional bodies like the AU becomes pivotal in mediating tensions, ensuring justice is pursued, and helping guide political leadership back to the path of responsibility and service to the people. Kenya's current situation demands such a response. By stepping in, the AU establishes itself as a neutral and respected authority that can bring together opposing sides in an environment free of bias or internal political influence. This neutrality is crucial for holding leaders accountable especially when citizens believe that national systems may be compromised or unwilling to confront those in power. When citizens feel that domestic institutions cannot or will not act fairly, the involvement of an external and impartial body restores a sense of hope that justice can still be achieved. This reinforces the public's trust not only in institutions but also in the idea that governance must serve the people, not control or intimidate them. Accountability is one of the central pillars of democracy. Leaders must understand that with power comes the obligation to act transparently, ethically, and in the best interests of their citizens. When they fail to do so, they must answer for their actions. The African Union, through its intervention, can help establish mechanisms to investigate whether there were abuses of power, mismanagement of public resources, or violations of human rights that contributed to the crisis. These mechanisms not only bring potential wrongdoing to light, but also create frameworks that discourage future misconduct. Leaders across the continent will take note that the AU is serious about ensuring that governance is conducted responsibly and within the bounds of the law. Kenya, as a regional hub and a country with significant economic and political influence in East Africa, plays a key role in the broader stability of the region. Its unrest has implications that go beyond its borders, potentially affecting trade, security, and migration patterns across neighboring countries. The AU's involvement is therefore not just a matter of national concern, but of regional necessity. Ensuring that Kenya returns to peace and that its political institutions are strengthened through democratic reforms helps create a buffer against further instability in the region. Peace in Kenya contributes to peace in the wider African context. Democratic principles such as fair representation, freedom of expression, protection of civil liberties, and the rule of law are essential to preventing the recurrence of crises. When these values are upheld, they allow grievances to be addressed through dialogue, policy changes, and institutional reform rather than through street protests or violent confrontation. The AU can support Kenya in reinforcing these principles by providing guidance, sharing best practices, and monitoring reforms to ensure they are implemented effectively. In doing so, the AU helps Kenya emerge from the crisis not just with short-term calm, but with a stronger, more resilient democracy. Furthermore, AU involvement can serve as a protective layer for civil society and opposition voices that may otherwise be suppressed. When external attention is focused on a country, it becomes more difficult for those in power to silence critics or act with impunity. This protection allows for more open dialogue and ensures that any national recovery process includes all voices, particularly those that have been calling for justice, equality, and reform. A truly inclusive process is key to lasting stability. Restoring peace in Kenya requires more than calming the streets. It demands that the underlying causes of unrest are addressed. The African Union can help identify these root causes, be they economic inequality, political exclusion, ethnic tension, or weak institutional checks and balances, and offer recommendations for how to resolve them. With its history of mediation and peace-building across the continent, the AU is well equipped to facilitate conversations that can lead to meaningful, lasting solutions. Finally, the symbolism of AU intervention must not be overlooked. It signals to the Kenyan people that their struggles and concerns are not invisible. It shows that the wider African community stands with them in pursuit of justice and good governance. It reassures them that their rights matter and that they are not alone in their call for change. This symbolic value reinforces the importance of unity, accountability, and democracy as shared African values, not ideals imposed from outside, but principles deeply rooted in the collective aspirations of the continent. In conclusion, the African Union's intervention in Kenya has the potential to be a transformative force. It promotes accountability among leaders by ensuring that actions are subject to scrutiny and consequences. It reinforces democratic principles that provide a path out of crisis and into stability. And it strengthens both national and regional peace by helping one of Africa's most prominent nations navigate a difficult moment with integrity and resolve. This moment is not only about Kenya's future, it is about the future of African governance, solidarity, and the unwavering commitment to peace and justice.